You're listening to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast, where we talk real estate, business, and designing a life that works for you. I'm Aaron Amin, and this show is my open journal as I juggle raising 3 kids under 3, building a $10 million real estate portfolio, and helping others do the same without burning out. Today's episode's a little different. I'm going to dive back into an exercise I did a couple years ago now, where I actually worked through and built my own list of personal principles that guide my life and my business as I move forward. So I'm going to break down exactly what the exercise was, the purpose behind it, and I'm going to share all 11 of my personal principles. So let's get into it. So first, the question underlying all of this was, why do we do the things we do? If that sounds vague and open-ended, don't worry, because I'm going to peel it back and explain why I decided to ask it. So it should have a simple answer, but as with anything in life, we cannot keep things simple, especially me. But I wanted an answer. So the questions that I asked for myself, I spent an entire month working through Ray Dalio's Principles Guided Journal, the guide to create your own principles and get the work and life that you want. So this exercise helped me in many ways. But first, what does he consider to be a principle? So his definition, principles are ways of dealing with reality to get what you want out of life. There are two main reasons you would create your own principles. First is to carefully define principles based on your own experience. It allows you to believe in them deeply. And number two, it aligns your principles so what you say and what you do are virtually identical. The benefit of writing these down and actually fleshing them out onto paper, you will think more deeply about them, you will think in a more principled way in general, and you will look at yourself through a more objective lens. This allows you to see the cause and effect in the relationship and your behaviors, and see important patterns that you've never seen before. The goals that I had going into this were pretty clear. It was to convert experiences into reflections about how reality works and make principles for dealing with them so that every time I was faced with a situation, I had a framework and a base of knowledge to draw upon. I wanted to write these down so that they could stick in my head so that I could act upon them on a regular basis instead of having to constantly make things up as I go. If that sounds rigid, I promise you it's not, because nobody could possibly memorize and have a framework for everything they do. But this exercise really keyed me in and got me tuned in to how I actually think about the world. And it forced me to be more honest with myself about whether I actually live up to those expectations. So without any further ado, here are my personal principles. Number one, taking the long view is absolutely critical to let compounding work its magic. So prioritizing long-term success over instant gratification is the best example. By allowing time for compounding, your small efforts and your investments can grow exponentially. This leads to extraordinary results instead of average results. James Clear is the person who articulated this the best when he talked about how a 1% improvement every day adds up to 37.78% over 1 year. So 1% feels insignificant at the moment, but when compounded over a long period of time, adds up pretty darn quickly. But beware, because compounding can also move in the other direction. Take it from somebody who has quite a few, and especially used to have quite a few even worse habits. Compounding works against you if you're not careful. And particularly with things like vices or diets, I am not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but when I became more aware of how these bad behaviors were working against me, it became a lot easier to deal with them. Principle number two, willpower can work to get you through the most situations in the short term, but you'll never be able to achieve long-term success without a strong why. So willpower is a tough one for me because I think I've been open in many different interviews about my grapples with addiction and how I spent a lot of time and put a lot of work into my recovery. I went into a rehab program. I had to reevaluate my life at the deepest level. And during that time is when I finally realized that willpower was not a strategy. In recovery, they call it white knuckling. Anyone can probably string together 30 days of sobriety, but when you don't actually peel back the onion and figure out what the long-term game plan is for what you're trying to do, it's not going to hold forever. And whether you are thinking to yourself, well, I'm not in recovery, so this doesn't apply to me, I would challenge you to ask yourself if there's something that you've tried to push your way through when you knew you weren't committed or you didn't have a long-term plan. So that's what that principle reminds me of, and you'll hear that kind of recovery theme in some of the rest of these principles. But there's also an exercise called the 5 whys that I think really helps here. And it's basically when you ask yourself, initially you ask yourself why you're doing something. The first answer that comes to your mind is not the deepest layer. So this actually came from Toyota, was the company that used this, and they used it to diagnose problems. And so they would ask, once they answer the first why, they would ask a second time, well, why did that happen? And then they'll go 5 times and get all the way down to the core of it. Typically, that helped them diagnose issues and come up with solutions. Principle number 3, focus on today. Dwelling on the past or fixating on the future distracts you from the moment that matters most right now. So once again, this is a recovery lesson for me because when I was at my worst and at my worst mental health, physical health, and things were trending in the wrong direction with that negative compounding, I was anywhere but the moment. It was really hard for me to be in the moment because I was always worried about something I had done previously, anxious about how that might affect me, and then projecting into the future and just playing out frankly, not very good scenarios in my head. And so I was always worried. I was always worked up and it really distracted me and took me away from what was happening right in front of me. And now as a parent, especially, I really struggle with that because I think it's important to be present for your kids and it's hard if you're not grounding yourself in a current moment and you're always thinking about what's around the corner. That's something I still grapple with today, but that's why it's important to have these principles. Principle number 4, let go of resentments. They will live rent-free in your head for as long as you let them. Find a way to forgive others and forgive yourself, or else inner peace will elude you. So resentments really do live rent-free in your head. And if you don't believe me, I also challenge you to think about when was the last time that you kept thinking about something that you felt like someone else did to you, and they don't even know that you feel that way, and you're just still thinking about it. I have learned for myself that there is not a long-term place in my head for those type of thoughts. And when I let those thoughts percolate, they really drive me nuts. Resentment is a big driver of bad behavior in my life, and I would be willing to wager that most people have the same effect. There's just no benefit that I can think of, especially in my lived experience, where holding on to a negative ill will served me in any real meaningful way. And I would like to continue to work on this and embody it so that my kids can learn from it too. Principle number 5, be brave, ask questions. Curiosity and growth are directly correlated. Engage with others by forming and asking great questions. So questions are tools for understanding, connection, and collaborative progress. I think that being able to formulate great questions, it also is a form of listening. It's how you process and how you take in information and really retain it. And when you think about podcasts, some of my favorite podcasts are the people that ask the best questions. So Tim Ferriss is one of the most famous podcasters in the world. He wrote the 4-Hour Workweek book, and he hosts the Tim Ferriss podcast. I don't remember the listener stats off the top of my head, but I believe it is the most listened to podcast in the world, if I'm not mistaken. Tim just asks questions the whole dang time. He makes some commentary here and there, but his episodes are 2-3 hours long, and he just cuts to the core of every topic, and he is not afraid to delve into different topics. He's not a niche podcast by any stretch, but he is a very clarified thinker and a great question asker. There are a few other podcasts that I listen to. I won't mention them in the interest of time, but I just think the best podcasts I listen to are folks who ask great questions. And that holds true in other areas of your life as well. So being not afraid to speak up and ask a question is something that has served me very well in my life. Today's episode is brought to you by the Remote Real Estate Academy, the community I launched last year where I personally coach investors and empower them to buy rental properties anywhere in the United States. My business partner Nathan and I have a collective 15 years experience with over 20 cash flowing out-of-state rental properties. We provide a step-by-step playbook on how you can build your own portfolio and start accessing the life-changing benefits of real estate investing starting today. Go to remoterealestateacademy.com for more info, or better yet, shoot me an email at aaron@aaronamin.com with subject line RREA, and I'll throw in a special bonus for podcast listeners who join the Academy. Now let's get to the show. Principle 6, ego is the most destructive drug out there. Humility is the antidote. Be on the lookout anytime you see your ego having an outsized impact on your behavior. So this is another one that is very tied to recovery. Ego and thinking too highly of yourself is very destructive. That is when you believe that you are fully in control. That is when you believe that the world will bend to your will and that you can influence outcomes that don't belong to you. And this is not me saying that you need to cede control of everything in your life, but it is me acknowledging from my perspective that I know that when my ego was at its largest, most inflated is when I got in the most trouble. And I think being aware of that has really changed my life. It's something that I still work on to this day because I am trying, to do things that feel like, I don't know, powerful or they feel like I'm pursuing something extraordinary. In my own eyes, like I appreciate what I'm doing and I recognize that it's not fully normal. But what I don't want to do is think that somehow makes me any different or better than other people in some sort of, self-importance way. I just don't think that that's what that means. I think it means that I challenge myself in a way that is fulfilling to me and to my family. And I appreciate and recognize the accomplishments are, built largely as a result of the other people around me, not myself. So yeah, that one sits big with me. Principle 7, altruism is the way. Actively seek opportunities to give back without seeking benefit in return. So one of my favorite movies is Pay It Forward with Haley Joel Osment from the early 2000s. Fun fact, he's actually my age. He was very young when he did this movie, but the whole idea was based on a project he did at school where he was supposed to do one nice thing for 3 different people that he didn't know. And with zero expectation in return, the only ask was for those people to go and pay it forward and do a nice thing to 3 additional people that they didn't know. And this spiderweb of generosity went on to become a national movement in this movie. And it was a beautiful thing. What I didn't realize is that a lot of that ties back to another recovery principle, which is that giving with no expectation of anything in return is actually a medicine in its own way. And it is something that I truly believe now, having gone through what I went through, is it can cure all those problems that might crop up with your ego. It can cure things like resentment. It can cure that all-knowing feeling that you are the one who has the answer because you're giving it away and you're giving it forward and you're just trying to be a good person in a world where unfortunately we're dragged down by a lot of negative things and negative interactions with people. Principle number 8, focus on doing the things that make you feel alive. You'll know those activities without a shadow of a doubt when you do them. But pursuing a life of vitality, engaging in activities that awaken your spirit, all this stuff, you will know what those feelings are. For me, one of them is playing drums. I really love playing drums. It makes me feel alive, makes me feel more alive than most other things that I do. That's something that I've enjoyed doing since I was a kid. It's a great creative outlet, and I never regret sitting down to play the drums. Similarly, in this phase of my life, I never have regretted going on a date with my wife and prioritizing time for our relationship, getting a full night's sleep. Ironic that I say that now because I don't usually get those, but that is something not to take for granted. Taking my daughter to the park, taking the twins out for a walk. Like, these are things that truly make me feel at peace with myself and things that I never regret, which is another kind of theme hidden there. But doing more of those things will make you a happier person. Go figure. Principle number 9. If you're asking yourself whether you're prioritizing your family enough, you probably aren't. Guilty. I am guilty of this all the time. It's a really tough thing to balance ambition with family. And while I have done my best, I recognize that there's always a way to be better. Now, the real catch-22 here, though, is that if you only prioritize family quality time, then it's going to be pretty hard to move some of the other rocks in your life forward. So there is a balancing act there. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. And family tend to understand in certain instances when you choose to do things. So for a lot of the time, I do my work late at night. I do my work early in the morning, or I do it when I can find time. But I do dinner with my family every night. I do, get up in the morning and we do our morning routines. And then we usually do at least one, if not 2 family activities on the weekend. And I wouldn't trade that for the world, right? Yes, there are times when I travel. There's times when there's some events, but we always find time for family. And I will continue to try and make that a bigger and bigger priority in my life, especially in the years when my kids are in the house. I just know that that's something important to me that I will never, ever regret. Principle 10, stop trying to control outcomes. You can only control your actions. So this is a pretty important one, right? The control is the operative word there. I think that goes back to the ego. And when you try and control things is when you are forcing, and when you force, things don't flow. Force is a constraining motion, not an enabling motion. And I believe that doing what you can and controlling not attempting to control things that you can't control is one of the most freeing thoughts I ever came to realize. And that evolves, largely from the serenity prayer, accept the things I cannot change and have the courage to change the things I can and the wisdom to know the difference. I mean, that's what it really boils down to. Then the 11th and final principle, constantly assess if the way you spend your time is aligned with your values. You'll know if it's not. So similarly to the one where you question if you're questioning whether you spend enough time with your family, then you already know the answer. This is the same thing, right? When you do something, you generally know if it's something that you would be proud of or maybe be ashamed of. And that's not to say that you can't do things that, nobody's perfect and nobody should attempt to be perfect because it's frankly not possible. But understanding, the way you spend your time in particular, and if that's mapping to the principles that you have in your life and the values you have in your life, hard to go wrong there. So this is another one where there's no perfect answer. I think that, the way we spend time, the way we manage time I feel uniquely qualified to talk about this just given how many different things I'm doing and people always ask me about it. There's no way to perfect it. And I encourage people to give themselves some grace as they try and sort through how to get everything done in their life that they want to and recognize what you have been able to do, and just try and ask yourself on any given day, is what I'm choosing to spend my time on today something that is in service of my goals or is working against them? So those are my 11 principles. This was a very, very long, boiling down a month long exercise into one little monologue here. So if you enjoyed this at all, I would love to hear some feedback. I'd love to know from you if you consider personal principles to be something important. If you want to learn how I did this exercise or swap any feedback, reach out to me on Instagram at Aaron Amin, REI coach, and let me know what you think. And as always, if you got any value out of this episode, please consider leaving a 5-star rating and review and sharing it with a friend. I will talk to you next time.
Thank you for making it to the end of today's episode. As you may know, podcasts are very difficult to grow organically. If you're getting value from today's episode, I'd deeply appreciate if you can take 30 seconds to leave my show a 5-star rating and review. This will go a long way to help me reach more listeners just like you. Thank you so much in advance.